Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have Blake in the Escape Pod to chat all about Echo, what happened. We're going to be following up with some conversation after, but we're going through the life and legend of ARC Trooper Echo. CT-1490 began his adventure in Star Wars The Clone Wars and is now a reoccurring and constant character of the main cast of Star Wars The Bad Batch. So we're going to be telling you what happened with him in the Clone Wars, getting into all his character depth, his detail, and his story arcs from the beginning to the present. Let's do it.
Another happy landing.
Hello, sir.
Hello there.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, time for another podcast. This time getting into Echo. Pretty exciting.
Getting into Echo is right. I mean, it's an interesting character because unlike some of the clones that we've seen through Star Wars The Clone Wars, he's more of a main focus clone.
True. And don't hold it against me, but I think I always preferred fives.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the one that's dead.
Ironically, as we're going to get into, it's kind of the old switcheroo, as they say.
Yeah. So Echo is known as one of the heroes of Anaxis, or the hero of Anaxis, and ended up, like all the other clones, being born on Kamino and fought the whole Clone War and survived the Purge and everything. And, he lived a long life. He's like one of the Rambo clones.
He probably is one of the few that actually survived the whole way through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if anything, if he's not first gen, he's second batch kind of thing.
I think second, because he never did fight on Geonosis.
Right. Yeah. He's that's right. Yeah. So he was probably probably part of that second wave of troops.
He also ran into Rex and Cody, and they called him a shiny. So I think that means you got to be Gen 2 then.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So let's get into this character. We're gonna kick things off with going through his story, starting first in the Clone Wars, and we're going to lead right up through his appearance in the Bad Batch, and then of course his additional mentions that he's had throughout the franchise, which usually includes books and comics. Now, to anyone listening who isn't familiar with the What Happened episodes, this is kind of what we do. With the What Happened episodes, we take a character of some particular title, and we just talk about their character as throughout the moments that they've shown up in Star Wars as like an entire character arc in a way, and kind of go through the phases of how this character has changed and evolved, and some of the events that they've taken place in, and the events that they've had to do with other characters, and why they're possibly even significant in any way whatsoever to the saga, if we can even make that connection. So let's start off with the first arc that Echo showed up in, which, to be fair, the chronology of the Clone Wars is absolutely terrible. All right.
Yeah, I was going to get into this myself if you didn't.
Yeah, it's not very good. So I always recommend watching it in chronological order, which you can find the list on Google. I mean, I think I've sent it to you quite a few times.
You had your own at one point.
I did have my own. Yeah, I copied it from the Star Wars website, and then there was some people who had noticed some some inconsistencies with the way that it laid out, and they actually had a better version as to like watch it in order.
Oh, nice.
So it was like 2 or 3 switcheroos that they had to do, but that was I took note of that, and then I also threw in where the comics like the Dark Disciple and the Son of Dathomir comic and all that took place, and made my own kind of list that I would then give to people who wanted to watch the show, and then I just kind of blew it up a little more and grew it, and it turned into a list of every single canon book, comic, and everything.
I remember
ever.
You were dedicated to that. There's one thing that I've learned over the years that you love to do is just having an absurd level of detail of making sure everything is just nicely ordered.
Organized data.
Very organized, yes.
I'm a big fan of organized data. Yeah.
Yeah, don't go into any of my files.
Yeah. All right, so the first arc, shall we call it, because we got 1, 2, 3 Clone Wars arcs that this character showed up in. Now, 2 of those 3, which are the later 2 that we'll be talking about, are actual arcs of a story. The first arc that I'm kind of going to be talking about is not a consistent 3 episodes. They're a bit disjointed, take place over multiple seasons, but there are 3 episodes that all kind of tie together to make one story.
And before, I just wanted to point out one last thing about the chronological thing, because I think it's extra important to this, where I think even these first couple episodes were out of order. So it should have been Graduating Domino Squad, where we actually see Fives like trained to be a trooper, should be first, but in season 1 they actually released him already as a trooper.
Yeah.
Which is extremely confusing.
Yeah, that's the confusing part about watching this show in release order, which is also the same terrible order that they have it on Disney Plus. And it's like, it makes sense because of course it's split up by season, but at the same time it's just like, I don't know why they don't just jumble it all together in one massive thing, and it would be a lot to go through, mind you, but so yeah, in the show season 1 he starts off as a clone trooper, but chronologically this episode takes place first. So we're starting with season 3 episode 1 called Clone Cadets.
Yes, you heard that right. The first episode that we're going to talk about Echo is season 3, and the second episode is season 1.
Yeah. Yeah, so Echo, he gets his name for having a tendency to repeat orders, I guess, repeat what other people say. And what's interesting about Echo is he's his batch of clones that he hangs out with all the time, his crew, or his squad, Domino Squad, is very different in the sense like how they operate. And that's one thing that really sticks out to me about this character, and possibly the reason why he's an ARC trooper in the first place is like he's got this tendency to be very creative with just how he operates in battle.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you can kind of see, I guess, the first kind of steps take place in this episode of how he got to be an ARC trooper, because as we know, the majority of troopers never got that far.
Yeah.
And I talk about EU stuff quite a bit, and this was one of this arc, I guess, if you want to go as far as to the point where he becomes an ARC trooper. That was a massive shift from EU, because EU, whatever rank they were coming out of the batch and training, that's what they were. Like, there was no moving up.
Yeah.
So ARC troopers were bred to be ARC troopers.
Right. They were bred to be better.
Exactly. Yeah. They got different training from birth.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing about Echo that was, speculated by Lama Su, I guess, or the Kaminoans in charge of the training, was that he was possibly just too defective, I guess, or too deficient.
Their whole squad was considered defective. They each had a different issue that allowed them to not work together very well. So they nearly failed their training. And that's what this whole arc is actually about. And it's about them actually overcoming their own independent issues to work together as a squad.
Yeah. Yeah. So something about this squad, Domino Squad, he's got a couple brothers in this squad. There's cut up, droid bait 5s, and heavy. And, you know, as they kind of fail in their training, they're pretty much at the point of like not succeeding at all. And they're ready to be tossed away as janitors, which there's a clone trooper, you know, a malformed clone called Clone 99, who represents kind of the failed attempts at making a human, and he's deformed, and it's, you know, he's not treated very well, and it's kind of like he represents a very large part of society in general, I think, you know, when it comes to clones that are all the same, and yet they treat the one that looks differently, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and you know, he was clearly made to represent that issue, right?
I think it was more an incident. My understanding was there's something went wrong in the process. Whether he was supposed to be genetically changed, similar to the Bad Batch crew, and it went wrong, or if something went wrong in the tank itself.
Yeah, it could have been anything.
Malformed him. If you want an idea of what he looks like, if you've ever seen the movie 300, he's kind of look like the Hunchback guy.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, that's kind of what I'm getting at. I mean, like, you know, you if he was like an actual person hobbling around, crouching over, and you know, he looks different, right? Like he you know, people would kind of stop and stare.
Hunchback in Notre Dame.
Yeah, Hunchback in Notre Dame. Or like people would stop and stare at him, right? And it's like, so he's kind of, you know, he kind of has like a word with, I think it's Heavy, right? He has a word with Heavy about having a chance. Like they're actual like clone troopers that have a chance at being able to do what they're bred to do, and he has no chance. His chance was thrown away, like he was. Yeah, it was taken from him, right? And yet, you know, his heart is in the same place as all their other brothers, but because his body's not the same, he's not fit for battle. So he basically convinces this broken team that's like frustrated that they're failing this test to go and do what they do. And they end up passing the test with flying colors. The second
time through. The first time.
Second time.
They failed miserably. And the Jedi leader in charge, forget what her name was, but she actually decides that they should be allowed a second shot because the clone troopers aren't originally supposed to allowed to have like an actual second chance at the test. So they're given that, and the head bounty hunter who's organizing it actually makes it more difficult than the standard test, and they still manage to pass by being more creative. And very similar to the Bad Batch episode where Tarkin's testing them, which is interesting.
Yeah, totally. So something that really sticks out about this episode is that second chance, and even the you know, one of the cheats that is basically put in Echo's way as part of his squad, that is to prevent him from passing the test, and they pass anyways. And you know, and Echo's one of these few people that has something to do with that, and the creativity of that progression that ends up getting them the status of trooper, which by the end of this episode they get sent off to do the mission that they've been born to do, right? So the arc picks up in season 1 episode 5, sorry. And it's the 5th episode. I think it's the 5th episode of the first season. It's called Rookies. And it picks up with Domino Squad on the Rishi Moon Outpost, which is a very boring place to be. It's on Rishi Moon is one of the moons above Camino, and operates almost like a shield and a emergency beacon for the planet, because Camino needs to be heavily protected because this is a time of war. That's where all the troops come from. Like, Camino is arguably, aside from the capital being Coruscant, the most important planet that the Republic can defend.
Oh yeah,
because
undoubtedly.
all their troops come from,
If
right?
you think about it, that's a massive flaw.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because they can like send all of our troops there and just blow it up, and then they're done. The war's over.
It makes sense that the Seppies tried to attack Camino, right? Because and if any of you guys have played the Battlefront 2 video game, you'll know that Camino is a multiplayer map in that game. They actually stylized the level or the map based on that episode arc from the Clone Wars, which is all these spider droids coming out of the water and attacking Tapoka City. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool that we finally... It's
actually full circle, because after episode 3, the film came out, the Battlefront 2 game had an episode where you were fighting on Camino, but you were fighting... Yeah. I think there is one you fight against droids as well, but the one I'm thinking of, you fight against your other brothers. So there's actually a battle on Camino, and that inspired the episode, which then inspired the new Battlefront 2. So.
Yeah, so it's cool. Rishi Moon Outpost, it's a boring place to be because, of course, who dares attack the Separatist homeworld, right? I mean, like, it's either nothing's happening or everything's going on all at once, right? So they're there to burn some time, and as simply put, as if they were in prison kind of thing. Yeah.
One thing that was actually really neat about the beacon that I discovered is it works by constantly emitting an OK signal. And then if something happens, lose power, whatever, then that goes away. And then people know something's wrong.
Yeah, like a broken connection or whatever being severed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's kind of a trap in a way, because if the Rishi Moon Outpost is destroyed, which a lot of the time that's what military is about, right? It's just like, oh, let's knock out the enemy base, right?
Yeah.
So you'd think like, oh, if I'm attacking Camino, I'm going to attack their outpost first, so that way they can't send any word of support, whatever. Yeah, send a signal saying, hey, they're coming. But it's actually that, they have to constantly have the signal going for things to be okay, right? And
it's pretty clever.
It is really clever. This is also the first episode that we see BX series droid commandos, which are a very cool addition to the Clone Wars. I think a much needed position to fill, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, because you have the heavy battle droids, which move slow and clunky, and then you have the standard battle droids, which are a little bit quicker but still pretty clunky. But the droids are always at a disadvantage against the clones.
And you got the droidicas, but they're like arguably not that stealthy.
They're almost like tanks, to be honest.
They're a bit like tanks. They're heavy, they're big, they're bulky, and I bet they're very expensive to make too.
Too. But there's really nothing that's really agile and can outmaneuver clones in a physical sense, because the clones will always, up to this point, always had an advantage of being able to move quicker, actually take cover, hide behind stuff, and try to like get in behind, right? Whereas the droids we have now are basically like walk forward and shoot.
Yeah. So Grievous sent these BX units to attack the Rishi Moon Outpost, and he's planned this entire infiltration of Camino basically. And they actually successfully get into the base and everything, and things don't go so well for Domino Squad. In fact, a few of them even die,
which is
in
crazy
the process
to me.
of this. Which is crazy because you spend a whole episode with some of these clones, and then they all end up being picked off one by one.
Yeah, exactly. You make a connection and get to know them personally. They have actual story arcs of progression, and then the next episode they're all killed. And I kind of blame Lucasfilm for this as well, is they actually ruined that by releasing it out of order.
Yeah.
These clones die, and then you meet them.
Maybe it was such a one-off episode, and then Dave was like, what if we go back and make these characters a little better? Give people something to look forward to. Kill them off. I don't know. It's like
he was learning with the master, and the master likes prequels.
Yeah, totally. But it's it's a good episode. By the end of the episode, Echo and Fives are the only two left, and Rex and Cody end up coming to their rescue in a way, because they're there to inspect the base, and they end up retaking it back. They end up blowing up the base, but the crazy thing about blowing up the base is that Heavy's actually the one to do it, and Heavy actually sacrifices himself to blow up the Rishi Moon Outpost.
That's right.
And Echo and Fives actually benefit from the reward of that, because they're part of that event. And and they get a little medal for it, and Rex says that he'd be happy to fight with them in the 501st any day, anywhere. And that's something that I think stuck with me about those two characters, Fives and Echo both. It's like, anyone, I've never been to war myself. I'm not a soldier or anything like that. But I mean, I can't imagine the process of like going to an event, where my friends die, and then I'm a sole survivor and get a little medal saying that,
it's crazy.
I made it out of there, and
people have
because of their sacrifice, right? Like,
real world, people have been through that, right? Like, it's a crazy thing to think about.
It is, yeah, totally. And and in an interesting way, a lot of these episodes that feature the clones are very based in a real world scenario, right? Where war is a real thing, and so is sacrifice and the sacrifices of war. So sometimes when I watch that episode as like that usually hits me at the very end, where he gets rewarded for, and he says something to Rex in the regard of like that he doesn't deserve this honor because he didn't die with everyone else, right?
Yeah, everyone else had a nobler sacrifice, which it's survivor's guilt, and that's a very common thing in those situations. Right.
Yeah, survivor's guilt. Yeah, for sure. And I think something about Echo that kind of rings through his character, is exactly that, is survivor's guilt, right?
Yeah.
So
I think he kind of channels it to drive himself to always try to do better. Yeah.
I think he does. Yeah. And it mixes well with his ability to be creative in battle, for sure. And that's, I think, what makes him the perfect ARC trooper, which in the next episode, which now we're going to get into, and the last episode of this kind of progression arc to his status as ARC trooper, it's called ARC Troopers, naturally, and is the second episode of the third season now. And so we're jumping back to third season again. And this is a pretty interesting one, because this is the episode that Kamino finally comes under attack by Grievous and the Separatist forces. And this episode was one of my favorites of the whole season until we got to the Mortis arc. Then those ones became my new favorite. But I loved seeing Kamino under attack and new parts of Kamino, and
it was cool and it was very pretty.
Yeah,
like
it was very
planet.
It was so cool. Yeah, and the fact that they
do you find it ironic that the Separatists attack with giant squid-like ships?
Yeah,
Waterworld.
Yeah, I find it interesting for sure, and it's like, like I wonder, I don't know how they got those, where they got those. Actually, what's funny? When we were watching the 2D Clone Wars show, and we actually did an episode on this 2D Clone Wars versus the Clone Wars. This is a little while ago that we did that now,
right?
But those squid-like ships, I believe, were Quarren, I think, in the 2D animated series. I believe the Quarren were using those ships. They
had a giant squid sort of robot thing they were driving. Is that what you're referring to?
They were driving something. It was like a it's the 2D the micro short that had Kit Fisto. Yeah. And I believe the Quarren had those same exact ships or something that looks similar. But so Kamino comes under attack and everything. And 99 was also a pretty main focus of this. The entire point of the invasion was to steal Jango Fett's DNA from the clone facilities, and they could unlock new possibilities for new droids and stuff, which I thought was kind of strange. But whatever.
I mean, I wait, the one for droids? That is silly. You think they would steal it so that the DNA they have would degrade, which is the problem they have now, and they can't make more clones. But a simpler thing is just to blow up the only facility on this only planet.
It is, really, it is. I think, and that was one thing that stuck out to me as kind of a why sort of thing. Like why do you need the DNA for making droids? Like,
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, steal the DNA because it screws them over.
Yeah. Well, one thing we have to keep in mind, I guess, is Palpatine is controlling both sides, so he doesn't want the war to end. So he's not going to make them successfully blow up.
That's true. He doesn't want the DNA to be destroyed, I guess. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Actually, yeah, I totally didn't think of that.
Bit of an oversight. It's funny, though, that these quotations, Jedi generals never thought far enough ahead that this could be a problem as far as the survivability of their army.
Blind we are.
Well said.
Yeah. So 99 was a bit of a focus in this episode because he finally gets a chance to prove himself in battle and gets shot in the back while getting more ammunitions or arms for Echo and Fives and some of the cadets and everything in the cloning facility as they're defending Tapoka City. And something about Echo and Fives in this. Oh, sorry, he was giving that stuff to. Was Echo and Fives there at that point, or was that just Rex and Cody?
No, they were all there. So Echo and Fives were put into sniping positions by one of the local ARC troopers, and so they were taking sniper shots at the droids. And 99 showed up, and he was carrying grenades for them to use. So they moved. Oh, they used that. Right. And then they needed to move to a new position to get more grenades. And along the lines of acquiring more grenades, 99 gets shot in the back.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they obviously proved themselves to be pretty good sharpshooters because at the end of this episode they got promoted to elite rank of ARC Trooper. So that was kind of nice. Pretty
crazy and
pretty nuts. And but again, somebody died in the process.
It's true.
To
someone they were very close to, at least for Echo. Yeah. I'm not sure about Fives.
Yeah. And it's also in this episode that it turns out that Heavy, who died on the Rishi Moon outpost, had given 99 his medal, right? For making trooper status or whatever.
He was wearing it. And Heavy gave him the medal at the end of the cadets episode, right at the very end.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
So when he got his trooper status, he gave Heavy his medal and said, "You're one of us. You're just as much as one of us as anyone else is." Right.
Yeah.
And so So 99's story arc kind of comes full circle, but that's another.
It goes a wee bit farther. I think this is a good time to talk about the fact that Clone 99 here.
Yeah.
He became the inspiration for the Bad Batch.
Yeah, I'm convinced. They've never actually confirmed it, but I'm pretty convinced that Clone 99 is what the Bad Batch Clone Force 99 is named after.
Yeah, exactly. You say that they haven't confirmed it, but in the arc where we meet the Bad Batch, they say Clone Force 99. Rex says 99, huh?
Good number.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
99.
What else could it be pointing to other than
right? Yeah,
this like Clone 99.
What's also interesting is that recently, I don't know if you've dipped into the Marvel comics or whatever, but there's something called the Imperial. I think it's called Task Force 99. Now, Task Force 99 is a group of stormtroopers, very much like the Bad Batch, Clone Force 99, and they kind of exist in the same time space theoretically, but they're basically a bunch of elite stormtroopers that I forget if they have powers or if they're all just insanely good at what they do, but they have been a possible name drop that they could show up in the Bad Batch at some point and have Clone Force 99 fight off Task Force 99, which would be kind of cool. I don't know what Task Force 99 is named after. Maybe Tarkin wants Clone Force 99 back and was like, hey, let's just make our own with some of our own elite stormtroopers or whatever, right? So
my
you never know.
Is they're going to be led by Crosshair.
Yeah, that's possible for sure. If it's like an early iteration of Task Force 99, I could see that happening. But what's interesting about this episode is like Clone 99, he comes full circle, and it's another sacrifice that Echo, I think, kind of sees and has to carry on with him as he progresses forward with Fives at his side as an ARC trooper. So the next time we see them, though, they are ARC troopers, and they take a big part of the mission that you're going to talk about, which is the the trilogy of episodes where they journey to the Citadel to rescue Even Peel and Captain Tarkin.
Yeah, these are some really interesting episodes because, namely, we do meet Tarkin, and it was very unexpected. I know when I was watching it, I was not expecting Tarkin to show up at all, and he's quite young here. And he actually is working for the Republic. Because I know, as far as I was aware, he didn't really come into this Star Wars lore until he was in the Empire. So the Citadel itself is actually a prison planet that was built to hold Jedi the Separatists actually captured, which makes sense because you would think when they catch the Jedi, because there's enough of them around, that this will inevitably happen, that they would have to do something with them. So the idea was they take them to this planet where they couldn't escape, even with their powers, and then they could be interrogated.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like the Citadel, in theory, like the reason as to why it exists is it's pretty twisted, honestly. Like I believe it was once owned by the Republic in like very old times, and then was taken over by the Separatists. But it was built to contain Force users.
I mean, it makes sense. It's probably from the old Jedi Wars. So in this arc, the 501st, as well as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, and surprisingly, Ahsoka, who snuck into the mission, they're tasked with going to the Citadel and finding Jedi Master Even Peel, because he's got secret codes for the hyperspace route that's needed for the Republic. So upon finding and getting him out of the prison itself, Peel informs his rescuers that his crewman, Captain Wilhelm Tarkin, had memorized half the codes and he memorized the other. So they decide to split into two different groups, and Echo goes along with Tarkin and has to deal with all of the, I guess, confrontation of Tarkin basically saying how clones are unneeded and not seeing why they couldn't just use regular soldiers, which is pretty good foreshadowing to basically what happens at the Empire.
Yeah.
So towards the end, Echo attempts to stop a droid carrying a personal riot shield, and he fires his blaster towards it, but ultimately fails, and the droid successfully fires upon their shuttle and causes it to explode. So as they're trying to escape, this droid manages to blow up the shuttle, and the explosion of the shuttle actually, we're led to believe, kills Echo.
Yeah, he dies in a very similar way that 99 does, because he's like, hey, we need to get the shuttle, and then he goes towards the shuttle, just like 99 was like, we need ammunition, and then he goes off to get more stuff, and then the droid blows up the shuttle and it gets him, and as he's kind of going off to do his thing. But it's a really sad death, because like the music goes like, oh, and then
there's a lot of build up, because he was supposed to be one of the main troopers, right?
Yeah, and you see his helmet just like torn up and blown apart on the ground, kind of smoking, and
and there's a huge time gap from here until, spoilers, we find out that he survived, which I don't know if Dave actually had planned this from the start, or he saw this as an opportunity, because we never saw Echo's body. Right.
I mean, we just assumed that it was blown to smithereens, right?
Yeah, and you'd also think that this is supposed to be a kid's show, so they probably wouldn't want to show one of the heroes' corpses.
Yeah. I'd like to mention on the side, too, that Citadel Rescue, the third episode of that arc, is one of the best episodes in the whole season. In fact, I would probably argue it's one of the best episodes of the entire show. It is incredibly well scripted. The effects were amazing. And the story progression for characters like Ahsoka, Tarkin, Even Peel, Echo. I mean, everything just happened so nicely, like well timed. Everything was super well done. The voiceovers were awesome. The music was great. And it also had a big chunk of relevant information to how the Separatists even get to Coruscant using hyperspace lanes, secret hyperspace lanes. And that's part of the information as to what Tarkin and even Peel actually hold, which is why the rescue mission is attempted in the first place, because they have such valuable information. So, yeah, really cool episode. And the Citadel, I just looked it up. It was constructed by the Jedi Order to hold rogue Jedi. I've twisted to that.
That makes sense.
And then the CIS take it over at the beginning of the war, and it makes a perfect prison for Jedi. It was actually mentioned in the Dooku Jedi Lost audio story and mentioned in the Battlefront 2 game, which I had no recollection of, but that's what it says.
The original Battlefront 2 or the new one?
I believe it's the new one that they're referring to. Yeah. And then Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, the one that focused in on Galen Erso, he was mentioned in that as well. And
I'm not surprised by it.
And the Tarkin book.
Tarkin's in it, yeah.
The Tarkin book, yeah. You read that one as well, the Tarkin book.
Yeah. I enjoyed that one quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
To be honest, after reading that book, I was left a little bit disappointed with the modern Thrawn because they're both they're extremely similar.
Yeah,
I thought Tarkin was done a little better. So some time has passed until we see Echo again, which is not till the very final episodes of like season 6.
Yeah, which at this point in time is season 7, because the Bad Batch arc used to be proxy animation for season 6, and then when they finished the show, I'm using my quotes here, finished, it's not actually finished, but when they threw us a bone and gave us season 7, we had the completed story arc for the Bad Batch story, which, you know, finally completed the animation and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so season 7, end of the show. Like,
yeah, it was like the very end of it too. Like, I think the only thing left was like the Ahsoka, like Order 66 stuff. Yeah,
that and the finale. Yeah.
And we find out that Echo his body has been like taken and captured by the Separatists, and they've done a lot of experiments and cybernetic enhancements to him. And he's left.
The Techno Union of all places, too.
Yeah.
I mean, like, only the Techno Union would like take a clone and then just use him as like a human experiment, right? I mean, that's the craziest part to me. That's what I love so much about it.
The one thing that I actually didn't realize until I looked into this episode a bit closer is he was technically sold to the Techno Union. So they rebuilt him as a cyborg and then basically sold him into mental slavery.
Interesting. So that takes place, I guess, between the episodes at some point.
Yeah, this is in between from, I guess, a bit of story. I'm not sure where this came from. If it was mentioned in the book or was just some sentence that was like offhandedly mentioned. But I was surprised to hear that. So when we see him, he's actually got a new replaced arm, which has got the kind of the R2 screwdriver for like attaching to computer terminals as well. He's got brain chips and like the Lobot head thing going on, and his torso down, some of the Maul has been replaced.
Yeah, they basically used him as like a human processor, right? Like just extracting information out of his brain and also kind of using him as like an artificial intelligence network in a way. Like they were running through the Republic's strategies and using Echo to kind of counter those strategies so that they could know how to defeat the Republic. I think, which is pretty insane.
It's pretty nuts. I think part of the reason why they picked him over random clones is he was an ARC trooper of the 501st, which was no
higher clearance.
Yeah. And because he was in the 501st, he also was with the group that had the most successful missions.
Yeah. Yeah, the 501st was always known to have an extremely good victory rate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if they ever actually failed. Anyway, it's kind of when we actually see him. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but he's kind of like in a stasis chamber thing, and he's plugged in, and it reminds me a lot of the Matrix.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
It's kind of like a reverse Matrix, right? So instead of being born in the Matrix and then like Neo is released, like he gets out and realizes all of these horrible things.
Yeah,
he was kind of like captured, like forced into it. But he does have the Neo moment because when he wakes up, he doesn't know that any of this has happened.
Yeah, it's like no time has gone by.
Yeah, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly catch us up to that point. And how we get there is Rex recognizes a code. So Rex is now working with the Bad Batch, and they're on a mission, and they intercept a signal from the Separatists, and in it is a code which Rex is able to decipher, and is actually Echo's clone number.
Yeah, like his call sign.
Yeah. And believing his friend is dead, he's left kind of in turmoil, but he needs to check it out because he needs to know. And even Anakin, but everyone in the party thinks that Echo's dead. And they keep trying to reassure him, like, Echo's dead. Like, this can't be the case.
Yeah, they kind of think Rex is losing it.
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of see over the arc or the episode, once they get into the Techno Union base, that the signal is coming from this single chamber at the back of the base, and inside of it is Echo, and he's tied up to this giant computer.
Yeah. And it's one thing to kind of talk about Echo seeing all these sacrifices being made around him and how it affects him, but it's actually brought up in this episode that Rex is really dealing with that, and he's like kind of getting teary-eyed over a picture of Echo that he has in his possession. And I believe he has a word with Anakin about it when he's insistent, like I can, I hear a signal. That's got to be him. He's got to be alive. And he's insistent that he's out there, but the rest of them are not as convinced, right? But he actually shares a little bit with Anakin about, how he's like seen so many people, so many of his brothers die in the war, right? And so I think for him, it's like he sees it as an opportunity to finally, maybe even if one of them is still alive, like he can actually do something about it and save them, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's finally given a chance. Yeah. Because many of his brothers that died, there's nothing he could do, completely out of his hands.
Yeah.
So one thing that was kind of surprising, and honestly, I can't imagine being like more terrifying, is when Echo wakes up. So they break him out of the stasis chamber. Wrecker like tears off the door. They get him out and unplug him. And when he wakes up, the last thing he remembers is the explosion on the Citadel.
Yeah. It's like no time has gone by, right? And that's what's kind of crazy about bringing a character like this back. It's like, I guess he wouldn't remember anything, even after all these experiments and stuff. Like they would probably keep him on stasis the whole time. Yeah,
so it seems they kept him unconscious the entire time. He never came to, which from his perspective, he was trying to save his friends from this as they're trying to escape, and the shuttle blows up, and he just just black out, and then you'll wake up. And these weird clones and Rex are over him, and he's tied to this machine, and most of his body's been replaced with cybernetics.
Yeah. And what's crazy about this is I mean, not to jump forward too much or whatever, but I mean, unless you're already ready to kind of get around to this, he actually finds out, of course, after the fact that Fives is dead at this point, because in his time of being absent from the battle, Fives had his own little mental breakdown trying to figure out more information about the chips in all their heads, right, in the clones' heads, and died in the process of trying to get that information to Anakin and Rex, right? He was shot by the shock troopers on Coruscant, and that was like his buddy, right? Like that's Echo's kind of ARC trooper pal is ARC Trooper Fives, and now he's gone, right? So he wakes up after all this like hell, this nightmare that he's been in, and he's lost his best friend. He's no longer there, right? No longer around, and
it's really
that's
sad.
Kind of like, it is kind of sad because that's kind of like, I think the last bone. you realize that you're not only kind of back from the dead, but after all the sacrifices that you've seen, you finally realize, the person that was like closest to being like my only kind of singular brother out of this army of people that are related to me in a way is also gone. And you're like the sole survivor. He feels like an outsider now because he's also got all this weird stuff on him.
And it's kind of poetic in a really sad way because both of them, this is something that is very abnormal, is both of them had to go through the loss of the other. Because normally, if you lose a family member, they're not going to mourn you, right? Like they're dead. But in this case, you get both brothers having to mourn each other, which is kind of unheard of.
It's kind of crazy, right? Yeah. I mean, and at this point, he's not only lost everyone he cares about. I mean, arguably, I guess he's got Rex, who he's got good relations with, but his clone brothers and such are gone, right? And he feels like an outsider, and now he looks like an outsider too. So I love how they finish off this story arc. If you want to talk about that.
Well, that's at the very end of it, but there's a third episode here. And it's something that I've actually found to be really interesting. This is where I think they made Echo's new, I guess you could call it body, but his new life circumstances actually show a bit of shine, made him more of, I guess, a bit of a diamond in the rough, if you will. And that's because now because he was used as a separatist, like planning droid, general, whatever,
as a tool. Yeah.
He now knows what they would do. So it kind of backfires on the separatists, where now he knows all of their plans and how they work, and because he was tied to their internal system, he can actually give them false information. And so that's used throughout this episode to round up a lot of the droids that were sent to kill Mace Windu, and then you release a pulse, like an electromagnetic pulse, and kill all the droids at once. And it's also used one other time. Admiral Trench, sorry, I was looking for his name, where Admiral Trench actually has a backup plan of a bomb set up. Echo's able to get into the computer to get most of the codes to deactivate it. Well, Mace Windu and everyone else had to figure out the last bit by interrogating Admiral Trench himself. But one thing I really liked through this episode is you're kind of left not knowing which side Echo is on, which I found to be really fascinating because
you don't know if he's corrupted or not, right?
That's exactly it. So it's like
a machine, then, man.
Yeah, that's true, right? So like he's offering to help the Republic again, but at the same time, he might be an inside man for the Separatists because he really is, at this point, a soldier of both militaries, both armies.
Yeah, and his body is representative of that. He's like half droid, half human, right?
It's exactly half clone, to be more specific.
Yeah, half clone, half droid. Probably the only one that is of that type, right? And manufactured by both.
That raises a good point, because you would think with an army of clones, there's bound to be clones that lose limbs and stuff, but you never see cybernetic clones.
Well, and even if the cybernetics were given to them, they would be Republic grade material, right? Like they would be issued by the Republic and built
Spooky
by a company from them. Yeah, something like that. It's funny that Echo, though, is the child of two galactic armies, basically. He's a clone that represents the face of the Republic military, but he's also got a droid body essentially and part brain, which is totally representative of the Separatist military, right? So kind of
poetic.
Yeah, kind of crazy there.
Yeah. So after all the shenanigans transpire, and Echo is given an opportunity by the Bad Batch to join them in their group instead of going back to the general Republic military and joining back again with the 501st. And he takes up that offer due to the fact that he doesn't think he would ever fit in again with the rest of the clone military. Yeah,
totally. And, that's what I was just kind of getting at It was such a great way to end off the arc because, he's in this different place now where he's lost everyone. He looks different. He feels like an outsider. And he's just found this batch of outsiders, who are all clones that kind of look like clones, but they're different, right?
Yeah.
And they all have these different attributes about them that make them different.
And take pride in it. And
they embrace it, right?
down.
They embrace that identity and they have their own thing going on. And so Rex kind of approaches him and he goes like, I think he just understands, right? And Hunter also gets it, and he kind of gives him the offers like, if you don't fit in here with these guys, like you can be one of us, kind of thing,
And it was
I really like that. Yeah,
it's a great offer, and we now see not only was it a good offer from his perspective of you actually have somewhere to fit in, he wouldn't be forced to be an outsider, but now we see it was also bringing in this beloved character and setting him up for the next series.
Yeah, totally. And it makes me wonder just how much of that was planned, because when the original when the original proxy animation for this episode arc was done, years ago, when season 6 was actually released on Netflix at the time, that's how it ended off, was he joins the Bad Batch, I'm pretty sure, right? And in the final animated one, years later, when they finally finished it with season 7, that's how they kept it. But then they decided to do an animated show to follow the Clone Wars that took place with these group of characters. And I found it really cool that's how they segued a Clone Wars sequel, was they took the only kind of group of clones that would likely not be villains after the Purge, right? And they delivered us a story that gave us clones in a post-Clone War era trying to survive in that time period, right? And that's what makes the Bad Batch so cool. What I'm less fond about the Bad Batch, which is what we can now talk about freely, with the first 5 episodes being released and everything like that, is that Echo's kind of taken a bit of a backseat. And if any of you guys listening have listened to our review episodes about these episodes in the show, it's kind of a disappointing thing that I've had to deal with as I've watched it, is that he's just kind of shoved in this backseat position as this new show introduces us to new characters, which is fair. I just hope they just do a little more with him in the future. It's
ironic that that's the same complaint a lot of people had with the sequel trilogy, with the original trilogy characters taking a backseat.
Yeah, and in a way, it's like I feel as if it's almost I give Force Awakens a lot of flack, all right? The one thing that I can actually appreciate about it in a big respect is that Han Solo was a main character of the movie.
Agreed.
Right? And that's something that I feel like should have been done with the other films. Like, I feel like Luke Skywalker should have had a bigger part of that movie. Not that his role in that movie was not, gravitational to any degree. Like, I thought there was, some nobility to what he did and stuff like that. But I just feel like we didn't see enough of him, and we didn't see enough of Leia, and we didn't see enough of those characters. And it's like, this is an animated show that I'm sure they will come around to maybe utilizing him in the future, because he's such a unique, child of these two parts of the war that it would be almost a waste to just keep him in the back seat. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think they are holding him back purely because they want us to know the new characters better. Something that did cross my mind, which is really unfortunate for Echo in the big picture, is he basically became the perfect soldier for the clone separatist war. Mm-hmm. Because not like he's for fighting for the Republic, and you would have all of the same fighting capabilities as the rest of the clones, but he also would be able to get into the computer systems and deal with them on the tech level side as well, unlike the rest of the clones, right? Yeah. And he was given these extra abilities right as the war ends. and he's no longer, basically all of the benefits he gained from that are no longer benefits because they're not really applicable.
Yeah, exactly. There's one last appearance that Echo has so far. I mean, as Bad Batch continues at this moment in time to come out with season 1, we have 5 episodes already. We're getting more. Season 1's going to be a decent long run, I think, with between, is it 12 and 16 episodes or something around there. But Echo actually was mentioned in the Lords of the Sith novel, which was in a vague memory of mine that I had to kind of look up once I saw this confirmation that he is. And in chapter 13, there's a very interesting little section here. And what I love about this book is that it really gets into the head of Vader and, Anakin as Vader, right? And he's still struggling with that transformation in a way. And this book takes place about 4 or 5 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith. So ironically enough, this is actually the same time that Jedi Fallen Order takes place. And is that, if anyone's played the game, you know what I'm talking about. But in chapter 13, there's a little area here where it says, the captain of the Royal Guard sat on the ground across from them. You should remove your helmet, Captain, the Emperor said. You
gotta do it all now.
It must wear on you to have it on all the time. Thank you, my Emperor, the captain said. He removed his helmet to reveal a mane familiar to Vader, a scarred face of a clone. The features and echo of so many faces from Vader's past. Rex, Cody, Fives, Echo. The roster of names moved through Vader's mind, each of them a trigger for a memory, each of them a ghost from his past. Now, it's unclear whether or not Echo's actually alive at this moment in time because the Bad Batch hasn't caught up with that moment in the timeline yet. But I'd be willing to bet that he possibly is. Bad Batches might be okay around then, doing their own thing.
That being said, one might think they would have shown up in Rebels if that were the case.
Right. You'd think. I mean, at some point, perhaps they got to go. Or maybe they'll take the Ezra way out.
Space whales to the outer rim.
Boom! Just hyperspace to the other end of the universe. Never to be seen again. They don't need to die. We just need to get them out of it.
Ship them out.
Yeah. Anyway.
I know Filoni doesn't like getting rid of his toys in a permanent way.
No, he doesn't.
Chances
somehow he squeaked Ahsoka through the original trilogy like a boss. I mean, I don't know how anyone else could have done it but him. And, it's like somehow he just makes it work. Yeah, somehow we're okay with it. And now somehow he's had us all having fantasies about her and Luke getting together. And, maybe she replaces Mara Jade as, isn't that crazy? I mean, if you think about it.
Think replaces Mara Jade, like Ahsoka and Luke get married and have a kid?
No, I'm just pulling your leg.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, but I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, wow, they both exist in this time period. They both have somebody very important to them in common. I wonder
she's
if
30 years his senior.
not that much. It's like she's 16 years a senior maybe. But it's crazy to think though that perhaps she doesn't know about Vader's redemption and Luke of course does. I wonder if they'll ever meet up about it. And if he ever tells her what happened, 'cause she knows that Vader's Anakin, right?
Yeah. And she must know that Vader's dead with the Death Star too.
Yeah, she must not feel him anymore. Yeah, in the Force, maybe. I don't know. I would be surprised if she wasn't aware of that, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if she had felt something of somewhere in the galaxy, in the universe, the spirit of Anakin Skywalker returned in that last flicker of time before he was out, right? Anyway, kind of off topic, but lots of cool stuff to talk about Echo. I mean, he's a main character of the Bad Batch. He's a reoccurring supporting character in many of the episodes of Clone Wars. But it really sticks out to me in this reference, in this book, that he's one of those 4 names.
Yeah.
Rex, Cody, Fives, and Echo. He's a staple 4 clone. I mean, He's
No,
in the
I
top
agree.
5, right? Like he's in that top of the list. I mean, for Vader, for Anakin to think back all those years, I mean, not in that this has been too long for him at this point in time, like 4 or 5 years, but to think back at Echo, like I was like, and I know Ahsoka's referenced in the book as well, but to think that face of the Royal Guard reminded him of those 4 people, right?
True. I mean, I think the list is slightly wrong. Maybe instead of Cody or Fives, it should have been Dogma.
Yeah. Such a memorable guy. Oh yeah, I remember that clone in custody.
Yeah. I remember.
Nearly destroyed the 501st by following Pong Krell's orders.
That's him. Yep. He was
That's him. Yeah.
so caught up with following orders that he was killing his own brothers.
Yeah. Anyway, Echo, everybody. Echo. If you're interested in watching all the stuff with Echo, you can go through Star Wars episodes of the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch. Of course, starting with Clone Cadets, Rookies, ARC Troopers, going through the next arc being the Citadel Counterattack, Citadel Rescue, and the final arc of the Clone Wars being the Bad Batch, A Distant Echo, On the Wings of Kiridax, and Unfinished Business. And now finally, we got the Bad Batch Season 1. So
we went through this whole second half of talking about Echo, and we didn't get into the fact that it's time for him to replace that screwdriver hand.
Oh my goodness. Let's talk a moment about the screwdriver hand. So he's got this screwdriver hand, right? And, I feel like it's just, anytime I see him, it's just like, this is an ARC trooper, right?
Yeah.
He's got to be like one of the most baddest clones ever.
But he doesn't feel like an ARC trooper in Bad Batch.
He doesn't feel like an ARC trooper in the Bad Batch. After all his modifications, he doesn't feel like
He feels
that.
like an underused astromech.
He does. And that's basically what he is, especially 2 episodes ago with the one with Fennec Shand. He was basically just the droid chauffeur. He was able to tell the droids, cause a distraction or whatever, and follow me and fix our ship.
Yeah, which is something R2 would have done in the Clone Wars.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the droid guy. So he's got a screwdriver arm. And it's like, I want that. I think I've mentioned it on multiple occasions, but I'll say it again. I love the movie Treasure Planet and Long John Silver, and his arm, his mech arm that transforms into like everything. Like he needs one of those.
Dude, it's so cool. Like
it's so cool, right? I mean, he's got everything packed in there. Like he needs one of those things. Like Tech is the computer guy, right? Or like the guy who's got all the tech knowledge. And I feel like Echo is just borderline on being a clone of Tech almost
he's an
in a
echo
way.
of Tech.
Yeah, he's an Echo of Tech. He's an echo of his reality. But yeah, he's basically another Tech, right? And we don't want another Tech. Like, it's like Tech is Tech, right? And like I don't want to think of Echo as Tech. I want to think of Echo as this ballin' clone.
And they've already proven Tech to be more capable hacker than Echo.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the gadgeteer in a way, right? Like he's got all the techie stuff. But what they need is like something of an assassin or something like that. Like they need someone with all the weaponized gear.
Swiss Army,
it's the Swiss Army man. Yeah, like ARC troopers are kind of known for being resourceful because they have all these cool gadgets, right? And in the Citadel arc, where we saw them at their peak of being ARC troopers, they pulled out all this, like some of these things. They pulled out these crazy gadgets and stuff. And they got all these wrist gauntlet things, and it's like, man, like what's packed in there? Like I want to know what's in there, and like I would love for them to put him back together again, kind of like Humpty Dumpty. It's like, okay, we've got this Swiss Army man that's got so much potential. Let's plug that screwdriver into like a giant mech arm or a rocket launcher or something. Like, let's get him geared up.
Interchangeable hands or something.
Yeah, let's gear him up. I mean, Echo 2.0.
Yeah, it's funny how we often see him like screwdriver punching through like droids and stuff. But
like,
yeah, exactly. That's what he does. Does that
just drills through them. Yeah. It looks ridiculous though when you see it hanging at his side and it's like shorter than the other arm.
Yeah, it's all stumpy.
Like, come on. Yeah.
No, I agree.
His helmet's cool though. His helmet's pretty cool.
They have a chance to make this really badass clone trooper, but they haven't used it yet. I'm hoping this is something that's going to come about. But you would think when they had the resources of the Bad Batch crew, Clone Force 99, because they have all the stuff they want. They're like their own unique group. They have the ship, they have everything that they want, all the explosives, all the unique gear. And Echo now has a modified like armor, but he didn't do anything with his hand. It's so
he's rebuilt for most of the part except his arm. It's like, ugh, but whatever.
What we all need to do is get a picture of Long John Silver, and we need to tweet that and Echo at Dave Filoni.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, like, he's got, like, I wish I could name every gadget that Long John Silver has, but I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Like, it's like, he's just got everything. Anything that he needs, he's got like a wrench. He's got a flamethrower, like a frying pan sort of like flamethrower thing. Yep. He's got like a 3-pronged mechanical arm thing, kind of like a
regular hand.
Yeah, plus a regular hand. He's got a sword in there.
Yep.
Like, you know, he's got and a pistol.
Yeah, I would say and a pistol. Yeah.
Yeah, and like he's got the whole 9 yards. It's like,
it's pretty cool, and I love the way it moves and like rotates to get to all the different functions. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty
totally.
transformery.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they could totally suit him up with one of those.
I think there's an egg beater in there too.
Like that. Yeah, as an egg beater. Yeah.
When we meet him, he's the chef, so he has a bunch of chef stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, like they could equip him an arm with a wrist gauntlet. Maybe throw some saber darts in there. Wrist rockets. Wrist rockets.
So we can watch those wrist rockets.
Blaster arm, grenade launcher. You know, how cool would it be if he had just went just slid his forearm up and down a bit, and he was like cocked, ready to go.
Maybe some of those like that. Mandalorian shields.
Yeah, or like one of those like a Mandalorian shield. I was just about to say like the ones that on the clones blasters that they had in season 6. It's the ones in Battlefront 2 actually. They have them around the big shields, like around the gun, right? The heavy gun. Something like that. Maybe you can project one of those out of his arm or something.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything, man. Like they could do so much stuff with him.
Like a zip line thing. Yeah. You do a lot.
And like one of them needs a jetpack. Jetpacks are cool. One of them needs a jetpack. ARC Troopers used to look so awesome because they had all that stuff, right? And they had the backpack. Gear. Yeah, they have all the gear, right? And that's why I think I love Republic Commandos so much, aside from the fact that they all look like normal-sized wreckers, right? Like they had the bulky armor and everything like that, but they're just packed. Like they got all this gear, right? And that's what was so cool about ARC Troopers, but they had the dual pistol gunslinging thing going on with all the gadgets and everything. They looked like a clone version of Jango Fett, which was like
that was the idea,
perfect combination, right? Yeah. Like, that was
if you
just so awesome.
Get into the original Clone Wars cartoon, each ARC Trooper had their own unique like weapon of choice, right? So one guy even had like a quad laser cannon that was attached
the shoulder. Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
It's kind of like each one that came out had a bigger gun, and then the last guy had like a ship cannon.
Like guns on top of guns. Yeah.
It's pretty cool though.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. But yeah, it's he's an interesting character. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's doing with where they're going to take his character in the Bad Batch. Hopefully, once we spent enough time with Omega and the rest of the crew. Weirdly enough, after seeing them in the Clone Wars for that short arc of episodes, and now the 5 episodes that we have, I'm already sold on the characters. You know, like they don't need to sell me more on the characters already. Like I'm fine. I'm good to go.
No, I agree. I think we are reaching that point. I couldn't imagine them continuing to push those sorts of story arcs. I think we're going to start getting stuff more interesting. I hope they just kind of go in a few different, a few more places with some of the characters. I was looking at the trailer and some of the footage that we have in there from unreleased episodes, and there's actually not a whole lot to really break down crazy. There's an episode, we know Rex is going to show up in the show at some point, and we know that they're going to end up on Baraka, which is the planet from Jedi Fallen Order that you start off in, tearing down Venator class ships, and who knows why they're going to be there.
There was a shot that was notable of Omega using her electro bow that she picks up in the most recent episode that we had with the Rancor, the baby Rancor.
I thought you were going to say using the Force for a second there.
No, so she uses this bow and arrow of hers, and no Force using yet. And there was a few other shot there. There was a shot of Wrecker battling some BX Commando droids. And which is interesting because the droids have supposedly been shut down. So I'm kind of wondering why those are still up and running. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting show. And, I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with it. So here's to Echo, everybody.
Did they get... Sorry, this is a little bit obscure, I guess. But did they get Amir Wat Tambor at the end? Did they kill him? At the end of the Bad Batch arc?
Wat Tambor?
Yeah.
Wat Tambor was killed in Revenge of the Sith on Mustafar with the
he was on
leaders.
there. Okay, I thought that was just the Nemoidians. Yeah.
That was everybody. That was like the whole Separatist council there that Anakin wiped out. Banking Clan to all the way to, at least I think Banking Clan.
Oh, yeah, he force crushed.
It was everybody.
That's right.
It was everybody that he killed. Yeah. So cool moments.
It's almost sad because now think about it, they could have had him he could have been building those droids or
he was just a
arc.
chairman. He was like the leader of the Techno Union. Somebody else must have stepped up to take over what was left of it, though. I'm sure it's probably just some sort of empire business that got absorbed or something like that. But that's where there's so much potential with the Bad Batch, because they can get into all that stuff. I have questions like, what happened to the Banking Clan after the Empire took over? Like, what happened to Techno Union after Empire took over? All that stuff, right?
Too. Yeah,
yeah, and Bad Batch is the greatest segue ever to tell that story, because
I want to know about the Trade Federation.
What happens to the Trade Federation, right? Does that get absorbed by the Empire too? I mean, what happened to all their ships? All those massive donut ships?
Yeah. I guess they just sent them all to that planet that they deconstruct stuff.
Braca? Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. I guess so.
We saw one in the game.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely where a lot of the wreckage goes, for sure. It's just do they take perfectly new ships there, or is it just the
I think so.
broken stuff?
From what I saw in the very beginning of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, is they actually fly in one of those donut ships in.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah. Pretty cool. Do we have anything else to bring up about Echo before we move on maybe to one of these more recent news things before we call it?
I don't think I had anything else to bring up.
All right.
So I'll just, I guess, speculation, but I think we went over everything at this point.
Cool. Well, that being said, I know everyone loves Star Wars Lego. So real quick mention, Darth Vader Meditation Chamber is available for pre-order right now on lego.com. And it's got the same aesthetic on the box as some of those UCS sets, the Mos Eisley Cantina and what's the other ones they've done? Cloud City. The playset ones, but they're also just really luxurious and big and stuff. So this is a mini one. 663 pieces. It's quite small. Looks cool.
Bring it up right now.
Looks cool.
From what I can see, this looks pretty sweet. And I recall as a kid watching the movie, always wishing that they would make something like this. And I kind of wanted to try to make it myself, just out of parts.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I know they. Wait, have they released one of these before?
I don't think so.
Interesting.
Oh,
looks
yeah.
Cool.
It's got a really fancy box. Definitely.
It is very supposed to be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the high-end sets for sure.
Yeah.
And it's actually slightly cheaper than the collectible Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
The Ultimate Collector Series Millennium Falcon. So if you have a budget for that, you could afford this Darth Vader Meditation Chamber.
Definitely. I know you had
a couple zeros off.
I know you had something about the Star Wars comics lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just kind of stumbling through, and you were saying that one of the episodes might not episodes, but issues might already be out, and that is a Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters #1. The galaxy's biggest bounty is Boba Fett, which leads me to believe they're going to have a story arc around a Boba Fett, I guess, becoming so well known as a bounty hunter that the other bounty hunters try to knock him off.
Right.
Or someone puts a bounty on him.
Yeah. It's an interesting crossover event because not only is this the biggest crossover that's happened ever since Marvel Star Wars comics have been publishing since the 2015 run, but it combines more crossover stories. So this combines Darth Vader, Dr. Aphra, Star Wars, bounty hunters. They have the War of the Bounty Hunters prelude called Alpha 1, I think is the issue's name. And I believe that's... Oh, and then the ongoing Star Wars series. So there's like 5 or 6 kind of titles in this lineup. And it's supposed to go all the way until fall, which is kind of crazy because that's like a really long crossover event. But each series, if you've been reading Vader, Star Wars, Dr. Aphra, whatever, they have been continuing that story up until this latest particular issue that released not long ago. Every series title has been getting a prelude to the War of the Bounty Hunters event, which basically segues their story into the War of the Bounty Hunters story. And then the issues following throughout the summer all the way till fall are all going to have the War of the Bounty Hunters title on it, and they're all going to be telling this consistent narrative. So it should be an interesting way of telling a story that happened between episode 5 and 6. Kind of makes me wonder if there's a little more to whether Han Solo actually made it straight to Jabba's palace or if there was a bit of a detour there. There's very little in the terms of canon books and stuff that takes place in that time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I've been really enjoying the Darth Vader comics. I haven't actually read any of the other new ones yet, but
this one
so far they've been great.
They had a bit of a prelude here on StarWars.com to give you an idea. And what happens with this Boba Fett comic is a open bounty goes live, and it's one of the highest paying bounties ever put out. And they say that here in one of the bubbles that bounties of this size are normally done like under the table or privately, right? But this one's it's open and it's for Boba Fett, and he's actually in a cantina. Everyone kind of like.
Oh, so this is not a bounty exclusively for the guild, but this is a bounty for like anybody.
Exactly. So it's basically like you bring in the body, you get the money.
Yeah.
And even bounty hunters such as Zuckuss are after him.
It makes me wonder, like, why, though? I mean...
That's the idea, is you don't know. Right. So you got to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That could make for some interesting story because we know that Bosk and Boba go way back, to the Clone Wars, right? So, and I know that he's in this series as well.
And that's exactly what it is in the EU. Because in the EU, originally, Boba is the highest paid bounty hunter in the galaxy, but he works exclusively like on his own. He doesn't work with the guild. Everyone else is in the guild, and he works only private. Personally called in mission. So people will reach out to him, say like, we'll give you this much money to do this job. So he doesn't have to pay his dues to the guild and all that sort of stuff. And throughout the novels and some of the comics, there's this kind of feud in between the guild, which is run by there's a feud between the guild itself and Boba because they're competing jobs, right? And so the guild's always trying to knock off Boba and like kill him because he keeps stealing all the best paying jobs, and they want to all move up the ranks. So they're always trying to kill Boba off, but he's always one step ahead. Yeah. And Bosk and Bosk's family, they run the guild.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's EU, right? That's the legends.
Yeah.
That's the legends.
So it's a feud between Bosk and Boba, essentially.
Huh.
But Boba, Bosk
yeah.
has all these different minions at like that he can like disperse, and then Boba's got all the best tech.
That could make for some very interesting story because, you know, it's never been confirmed in the canon whether or not Boba at that point in time is or isn't part of the guild. So just based on the Mandalorian, he's obviously not part of the guild at that point in time, right? I don't even know if he's a bounty hunter at that point in time.
He was considered dead for a long time.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if maybe this lineup will possibly set up anything for those future shows at all, or if maybe they'll make links to the existing shows.
No, I 100% would think, just based on timing of this comic coming out, that it's going to lead into probably something that'll have to do with Book of Boba Fett.
Book of Boba Fett for sure, yeah, because that comes out this fall, and the series crossover ends in, I think it's October or something like that.
Yeah,
at least as far as I know. So
it's a good lead up.
Yeah, it is a very good lead up because I believe the show comes out in November or something like that. So it's going to be an interesting piece of timing there, which, yeah, for sure. I hadn't even run that through my head. You know, it's always crazy trying to stay on top of all the Star Wars stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, there's like a connection there, you know.
Yeah. You start to see the pieces.
Pieces of the corporate releases, you know, all these pieces of
the overlap.
Their product coming out.
I mean, it could just be a ruse, if you will, because I remember people were so excited for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., thinking that they're going to find out what's going to happen in the next Avengers movie. Yeah, and they didn't share anything. It was a complete waste of time.
Yeah, we'll see. It might also just be, because I know Marvel does this with their superheroes, is they'll release a new title for a character when the hype is about. So more recently, I don't know if you're into the superhero stuff, but the trailer for Legend of Shang-Chi came out on YouTube and everything like that, and people were talking about it. The next thing I know, Marvel's releasing a #1 issue for that titled character in a comic book that's, you know, again, separate from the MCU, but they're just using that character and trying to gain some revenue off all the comic books.
It's not surprising.
Hey, if you like the trailer and you're excited for the movie, here's the character featured in this story, and we're going to be telling a new story with this character, right? So that's kind of what they do. And it makes me wonder if this War of the Bounty Hunters is set up by Lucasfilm to tell those connections for future stuff, for past stuff, or if it's just a marketing thing and it's like, this is the year that Boba Fett's going to have his own show. Let's just cash in on it and see if we can sell some extra comic books.
It's probably a bit of everything, to be completely honest. I would hope that they would use this opportunity to set up some of what will lead into what's happening with Boba Fett. So like, we don't know why Boba turned on Jabba, or like turned on Bib Fortuna,
yeah.
Just came in and took over. Like, there's got to be some reason. There's no reason to believe, prior to seeing Boba take over, become a crime lord, that he would be interested in doing that at all.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you know, there's a story there to be told, and it's almost like the gap between episode 4 and 5 with Star Wars. The more recent, well, a couple of years ago, the original Star Wars and Darth Vader lineups that came out in 2015. They told that story as to how Vader figures out that Luke is actually his son. Because in the movies, it's actually never told. Like, it's like in the first movie, it's like, oh, this guy's strong with the Force. And then Death Star blows up, Millennium Falcon comes in, boom, Vader's flying away. And in the next movie, he's hunting down Luke like a dog, trying to get him because he's convinced that he's his son and everything like that. And then he finally tells him the truth. But it's like, where did he actually even find that out? Because in episode 3, he thought that Padme and the children or the kid, because he didn't know he had two, had just died, right? And never found that out. So that story for ages now, even in the novels, I don't think it was
ever addressed.
Ever addressed in the way that it has been more recently. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Legends novel that maybe did tell that story, which I just haven't read, but it's never been fully kind of smacked out there as an arc as to how he discovers that information, right? And that's something that I really really liked about that series. So it's possible that maybe filling that void, something that they'll do with the Boba Fett comics, where there's some bad blood between him and some of the crew in Jabba's palace, right?
Yeah, I could totally see that. It's a great opportunity. They should.
Yeah, for sure. And I could see that if he ever kind of something comes up where he's like, you know what, if I see my opportunity to take leadership here, I'm gonna do it, right? And that's exactly what he does. So, I'm excited for that show.
Yeah, I'm quite curious about this comic. Actually, I might pick this one up.
Yeah. So that's all the time that we got for today. But we'll be back with Friday's Bad Batch reviews going forward. And do you have any last words on that or Echo?
I think we covered it all pretty thoroughly. I'm gonna stand by what our last comments really were, and that's that you just want to see Echo utilized a little better, and we're excited to see that. I think we will get it. Like, I don't think this is something they're going to continue with him backseating. So I'm excited to see him come to the forefront, and maybe even have some cool arcs that have to do with like him and like about Echo himself.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Well, we'll catch you in the next one.
Sounds good. Got a blast.
Got a blast. All right, thank you guys for tuning in to Star Wars Escape Pod. And as always, if you can share this show with a friend, let them know that Star Wars podcasts are a cool thing to listen to if you're a Star Wars fan. Feel free to leave a great review as well. We'd love the support, and it helps bring in new people to listen to the show as well. If you haven't joined our Discord profile, we're streaming episodes here and there on a loop in the live stage discovery section of Discord. Of course, we'd love to put this show on 24/7 for Star Wars fans out there. But, we have lives beyond talking about Star Wars, believe it or not. Not to say that building a life around Star Wars chat is not cool. I mean, we love it. We just can't do it all the time. Sleep is a thing. So we'd love to have you join us for the ride with future episodes reviewing The Bad Batch. More What Happened episodes coming down the road. Stay tuned for the reviews of more games going forward, books from the High Republic era, and of course more discussions about many more crazy cool Star Wars topics in the future, brought to you by us here at Star Wars Escape Pod. Feel free to send us a voicemail, email, tweet, Instagram. It's all in the description below at SW Escape Podcast. We'll see you next time here on the show in the Escape Pod. May the Force be with you guys, and we'll see you next time.